You know, wedding planning can seem like a lot, maybe even too much. That's why Simply Eloped is here to make it easy and deeply human. They've planned over 14,000 personalized ceremonies in 37 stunning U.S. destinations, and they coordinate every detail that's important to you with real care. You just bring your marriage license and, well, they'll take care of the rest. Your love deserves simplicity. Visit simplyeloped.com.
The Spring Mountain neighborhood has been designated a redevelopment area by Clark County. So what does that mean for Chinatown? Today in CityCast Las Vegas, I'm with Clark County Commissioner Justin Jones and UNLV Professor Mark Padoonpat to find out how a 10-year plan will change Chinatown and why preserving Asian communities like this one is important. It's Monday, December 22nd. I'm Sarah Lohman, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Justin, so you are the commissioner for District F, which includes the Spring Mountain neighborhood. So what are the biggest challenges that our Chinatown faces that led to this redevelopment plan?
When I got elected 7 years ago, Spring Mountain was really starting to boom. There were new shopping centers that were coming in, but this was a legacy industrial area. If you go up Spring Mountain, there is a giant pit where we get sand and gravel from, and those trucks will run. Yeah,
wow.
Still there, and probably will be there for decades to come. And so there was a lot of industrial there, and so what we're really trying to do with this plan is bring some cohesion, bring some vibe to the organic growth that was happening in that corridor. So when we kicked this off in 2023, we started literally with a board where people could put their sticky notes on it with their ideas for what was the biggest priorities for Spring Mountain. And traffic was a big concern. People making sure that they could get from one side of the street to the other so they can grab their boba on one side of the Spring Mountain and grab their dumplings on the other side of Spring Mountain. So safety was a big concern.
Not an easy or safe street to cross. It's wide and people go fast.
People go fast. You'll hear lots of people talk about how it feels like you're playing human Frogger on Spring Mountain, and we don't want that.
And Mark, you've been involved with some of this plans. Like, what have you been hearing from people in Chinatown? What do people want?
Yeah, very similar things. I mean, I think traffic, infrastructure, fixing, Justin and I had a conversation a couple of months ago, and the sidewalks are also very narrow, right? So you have wide streets, narrow sidewalks. But the other thing that has come up is also shade, right? Like shade, which I think is connected to walkability and having kind of a walkable public space. And so, Vegas obviously gets very hot. So shade in the form of shade over bus stops, covered sidewalks, but also trees.
Mark, you are an expert in the history of the Asian communities here in Las Vegas. Can you share a little bit of that history? Like, how did Chinatown start as this Asian business district?
Yeah, I'd love to. As Justin mentioned, it was created in 1995 by a team of Taiwanese investors and developers, James Chen and Henry Wang. And there's really two reasons. One was there was a lack of good Chinese food. Because, there was a strip, but Las Vegas was getting a lot of Chinese tourists in the 1990s, and they wanted good Chinese food and they couldn't find it. And so James Chen saw this as an opportunity to say, hey, why can't we build something where Chinese tourists can go off strip, get a good meal? And that's also then connected to the second reason is Vegas in the late 80s, early 90s, the strip in particular, casinos, that's when they jump into catering to the Asian market, right? And they're focused specifically on catering towards whales, right? Quote unquote whales and high rollers from Asia. And so you have the growing number of Chinese tourists, the growing number of high rollers coming to Las Vegas. The casinos are interested in expanding and tapping into what they consider this niche market. And then James Chen says, you know what? I think this hasn't been done before, but we will build a Chinatown Plaza here and see if we can accommodate this growth.
Thinking ahead of we'll start here and see if this grows into a larger business community?
Right, because there's not a lot of Chinese living in Las Vegas at the time.
Right.
I think it's something like 1,500.
Right.
So there's not a lot of Chinese residents. So this is specifically for Chinese tourists.
So question for both of you. We've gone into this a little bit, but our Vegas Chinatown is different because it's not really a residence area. It's a business district. What other ways is the Vegas Chinatown unique from other Chinatowns, say in like New York or San Francisco or other areas?
Well, I think Mark kind of hit on how it came about. If you go to the old LA Chinatown, that really has the history to it. But if you go to San Gabriel, it's sort of the new Chinatown, and the developers of our Chinatown came from that same community. I visited the plaza that they built in San Gabriel. It really has that different feel to it, and so we're sort of the new version of how to build a Chinatown. I was at the San Francisco Chinatown last month, and it is beautiful and amazing, has such rich history.
So our Chinatown is kind of like a toddler compared to other historical Chinatowns, right? It's not quite a newborn, but it's still pretty young.
It's it's the Gen Z of Chinatowns.
Yeah. And I'll also add, I think what Justin is also hit on correctly is that San Gabriel, this is a suburban Chinatown.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that's very distinct from the historic Chinatowns of LA, New York, and San Francisco, where, those Chinatowns were born out of intense racial exclusion and racial segregation in policy and in practice. Our Chinatown, not to say that those conditions have been eliminated, but they weren't born directly out of those conditions, right? And so it's much more similar to what scholars have called ethnoburbs, right? These suburbs with large immigrant populations that have very strong ethnic expression. What makes, I think, Vegas even unique from San Gabriel is we're about 1.5 miles away from the Strip. And so there's this mega kind of tourist influence on our suburban Chinatown that other suburban Chinatowns around the country don't have.
And, I see that part of this plan is about not just how to grow Chinatown, but also how to preserve what is there and preserve the businesses there. But I also think people can have a difficult time thinking about preservation when it comes to something so new. So how important is preservation when thinking about a relatively young Chinatown like ours?
I think it's critical, and it's really incorporated all throughout the plan. We want to make sure that whether we're talking about Chinatown Plaza or it's just a business that is in one of the other shopping centers, that those small business owners have access to grant programs. They have access to the same resources that some larger developer who's coming into the market for the first time has access to. So we want to make sure that as new plazas get built there, they don't crowd out the small business owners that have been there for decades now.
And I think for me, looking at the plans, I think one of the great things about the plan is its emphasis on placemaking. And so when it comes to placemaking, it's about the storytelling that turns this space into a meaningful place. And what I'd like to see, I think, more of, because the plans right now are really about preserving kind of Asian culture, Chinese culture in this space and telling that story. And I think there's a great opportunity to also include Asian American and Chinese American history in Las Vegas. And so a story, and I don't know what that looks like. It could be plaques, it could be murals, it could be some recognition that Chinese Americans and Asian Americans have been in Southern Nevada for 100 years. Yeah. And I think that's another layer that is really important to preservation, that is not just preserving Asian culture in Las Vegas, but it's also Asian American culture in Las Vegas and history that offers this broader framework for belonging. And so I think that's the significance of kind of preservation, is that it signals to everybody in Southern Nevada, in the state, in the country, that Asian Americans and Chinese Americans have been here and have some history to these places.
And, this brings up a good point, too, because we're calling it Chinatown, but it's not just for the Chinese community. I mean, Mark, I used your work to convince my out-of-town friends about our incredible Thai food and the legacy of our unique Thai food here in Las Vegas, too. You can go to Chinatown and get everything. Justin, what was the decision to designate this area as a Chinatown as opposed to an Asiatown?
Well, when we started the process, we called the plan itself, the process, Inspiring Spring Mountain, because we wanted to get inspiration from the small business owners who were there, from the customers, from the tourists, even from Clark High School students who walk over to grab their boba after school. We wanted to be inspired by the people who are there. And as we went through that process, that was one of the questions as we went through surveys was, hey, do we want to call this something more like Asia Town, just to make sure it's inclusive of all of the tremendous other groups that are out there, not just the Chinese businesses that are in the corridor? And really got the feedback was that although Chinatown only includes sort of Chinese folks in the name, that it was a place that people knew. Like if you talk to anybody in town and they tell you, hey, we're going to Chinatown, everybody knows exactly where that is. If you were to change what that sort of historic placemaking moniker is, then it would confuse people. And so that was sort of why we stuck with Chinatown as the moniker. But obviously, Spring Mountain is something that's going to be incorporated to everything that we do.
You know, I understand that perspective, but Mark, do you worry that flattens maybe outside perceptions of what cultures are in that space?
I don't know. I'm conflicted about this, right? Because I think on the one hand, James Chen was very aware that Chinatown already had meaning around the country and that he didn't have to do the work of explaining and starting from scratch, and that there were already conceptions of what Chinatowns were and what they could be. And so he was playing off of that imaginary, right, of how people imagine Chinatowns to be. And I think that's very powerful, not just to support it and not just to buy into it, but also to potentially challenge it, right? To say, this is what you think Chinatown is, but it's way more diverse, way more ethnically diverse than what you think it is. So I think in that way, it works. And the other thing, or the other reason why I'm not quite sure that it flattens, is because then it offers opportunities for other AAPI populations to then highlight their own ethnic groups. So Filipino town, if there was an Asia town, they might have been included and lumped into that. And then there's no space for now a distinct Filipino town with its own kind of placemaking, ethnic history in Las Vegas. And so I'm sort of conflicted. Obviously, I don't know if there's like a right answer, but Asia Town also feels very
flattening.
Very flat, kind of like a global multicultural, right, Justin? Like it's like a Epcot or something, right?
It's a whole continent.
It's a Disneyfied version of what we're trying to accomplish. It's to your point also, not just Filipino town, which kudos to the entire Filipino community and my colleague Tick Sagerbloom for making that happen. But Koreatown Plaza is within the Spring Mountain corridor currently, has been there for a long time, and is going to host the upcoming Lunar New Year festival.
Oh, cool. Yeah, right around the corner.
Meet Nevada HealthLink, Nevada's official health insurance marketplace. Your link to new plans, more selection, free assistance, and name brand health insurance all bundled together. Our marketplace is growing and has the state's widest selection of quality health plans. Find savings and quality coverage regardless of your income with new state-approved Battle-Born state plans. Visit NevadaHealthLink.com. In a few minutes, you can find the health plan that's right for you.
Nevada HealthLink. Our plans are made for your plans.
Conoce Nevada HealthLink, el mercado oficial de seguros médicos de Nevada. Tu lugar para encontrar opciones, ayuda en español y seguros de salud a tu alcance. Estamos creciendo y tenemos la mayor variedad de planes en el estado. Encuentra planes a tu alcance sin importar tus ingresos con los nuevos Battle-Born State Plans aprobados por el estado. Visita NevadaHealthLink.com y en solo minutos encontrarás el seguro de salud que necesitas y mereces.
Nevada HealthLink. Our plans are made for your plans.
So, Justin, phase 1 of the Inspiring Spring Mountain Redevelopment Plan is kicking off next year. So, how is Chinatown going to look or feel different at the end of 2026, a year from now?
Sure. So we, as part of adopting the plan this week, we also adopted a $750,000 small business grant program. So property owners, business owners can apply for grants up to $75,000, and they can use those dollars for security improvements, lighting improvements, facade and storefront enhancements. We already have a program that we're working with property owners to do murals on their properties, but this will also allow for other type of architecture improvements, landscaping improvements. The idea is really just to heighten the storefront look and feel of the entire corridor to make it more cohesive. Part of this is the roadway itself, right? If you've driven on Spring Mountain, you know that you might fall into a pothole, and that's very frustrating. So we're really approaching this in a couple of phases. The first, as I mentioned, is a new pedestrian crosswalk between Chinatown Plaza and Shanghai Plaza. That will be open by the end of this year. Phase 2 is to resurface the road between Decatur and Rainbow. That is some of the worst pavement along the area there. And so that'll get started by the end of next year. And then phase 3 of the roadway improvements, which will be the biggest piece of this, will get started in 2027. And that is to take one lane westbound out of the core of the Spring Mountain area between Valley View and Decatur. And that gives us the extra right of way in order to build out those wider sidewalks, to install those street trees like Mark was talking about, so that we can have that shade, not just be able to walk, but also walk with shade, to incorporate art elements and creative spaces for people to walk through the corridor.
Yeah, and definitely shade is, of course, a bigger conversation in the city right now, too, in the push to put more trees in. But what about parking? Everybody knows what a nightmare it is to park in Chinatown. Are we looking for solutions?
Absolutely. That is one of the biggest things that we heard throughout this process. I mentioned those sticky notes. There were many sticky notes that talked about parking, and structured parking garages are one thing that we are going to prioritize and incentivize. And we're actually looking for opportunities, as part of the redevelopment agency, we have dollars that are available to invest there. And we want to make sure that those types of amenities that will benefit not just one property owner, but will benefit the entire community, anyone who goes there, like parking. Those are things that we're going to be looking to work collaboratively in public-private partnerships with developers to try and build out that additional parking resources. It's not just about, yes, we know that lots of people drive to the Spring Mountain corridor, and certainly parking is a big piece of that, but we're also exploring expanded bus operations there to build out nicer and friendlier bus stops in that corridor, working with RTC. And then we also know that the Boring Company has identified 3 locations where they will service the Chinatown corridor. And so just trying to understand better what the time frame are for build out of those stations.
Justin Jones, I don't think they understand the time frame. I'm being perfectly honest with
comment.
you.
No comment.
I'm going to start right here and now the Expand the Monorail campaign. Let's do it. Add more monorail stations. I'm here for it. So I have to ask you about the G word, gentrification, because you mentioned already, Justin, like chefs on the, who cut their teeth on the Strip, like opening restaurants in Spring Mountain, those typically tend not to be chefs of Asian descent, right? They tend to be white chefs. And of course, by having more green space and housing, like it might not necessarily be serving the communities that are currently thriving in Las Vegas's Chinatown. Is there a way to both protect the communities that are already there while sort of welcoming in these changes? Because everybody wants nice shady sidewalks, right? So what do you think?
I think there's a delicate balance there. We're always on the lookout to make sure that we're not crowding out those that are already there. But I think that by making sure that we have anti-displacement policies there, that if we are providing grant funds to businesses for improvements, that they are not just turning around and pushing people out with higher lease rates.
Yeah. What do you think, Mark?
I have a lot to say about this. I think not just because I study it. But, I think the way that I understand it is close to sort of Justin. There's a delicate balance because historically, urban redevelopment, renewal in urban areas have always meant removal, right? Like displacement, gentrification. And yet at the same time, I think I'm interested in finding ways that we can do urban renewal in ways that don't repeat those processes, right? Like there has to be a way to improve infrastructure and quality of life for all residents without automatically or always it always leading to displacement of the poorest people in that neighborhood. You mentioned that Vegas and Chinatown in some ways is like a toddler, right, compared to other Chinatowns. I see it that way, but I also see us as a model, right? We have a really, really valuable opportunity to put forth a model of how redevelopment, especially in suburban areas, right? So that's sort of where a lot of my colleagues are thinking about or are going and thinking about redevelopment. These aren't just happening in cities and urban areas. Right. Suburban redevelopment is growing and growing rapidly. And I think Vegas has a real opportunity to show other suburban areas who are thinking about developing their Chinatowns or Asia towns. I mean, this is happening across the country, how to do this correctly. And I want to be specific here, right? And Justin and I have talked about this, and Min Jayan and I have talked about this as well. It's a predominantly Latino neighborhood, right? And so when we think about community and getting community feedback, who's the community, that has to mean everybody. It can't just mean, the business owners or Chinese residents or Chinese tourists, right? This means all of the residents, the workers. If you go to China Mama, I go to China Mama all the time. The workers are predominantly Latino, right? And so they haven't, all of the communities have an investment in making this place better, right? And I think that's one way to begin to put in the kind of checks, the anti-displacement efforts that Justin is referring to. And Chinatown, like many Chinatowns, is a multiracial, multi-ethnic immigrant neighborhood, and all of those voices and all of that input need to be, taken seriously. This last thing I'll say is this is where I feel like Asian American studies, ethnic studies, scholars who study race, space, and placemaking can have some influence and can be of some assistance, right? Because these are the questions that we ask every day. And these are the questions that Justin is now asking about redevelopment. And I think that's important, right? That scholars who study this should be part of the conversation around how we can do this.
And I think also because we are a new Chinatown, I think there's a much more open and inclusive vibe from the businesses that are there. And are welcoming new businesses to come down there and welcoming the neighbors, the neighborhood to participate in the exciting transformation, the exciting growth that you're seeing there. And by contrast with, Mark knows this is better than anyone, with some other Chinatowns that are threatened, like, for example, in Philadelphia, we're threatened by development. It was development that was coming in to displace what was already there. And I think just the opposite is happening here. We're displacing industrial. That is the legacy. And that's okay. I mean, that's kind of the idea, is that we are displacing some industrial that's going to have to find some other places to be here in this town. But it is so that the rapidly growing API community here can have more spaces to share the love and skills that they have.
That's such a great lead into my last question here. I'd love to hear from both of you. Like, what do you hope this plan for Chinatown does for Las Vegas as a whole?
Well, I mean, for me, I really think it is an opportunity for the entire community to participate. Much of the time in government, we spend money to build these plans and they go sit on a shelf.
Sure.
This is not a plan that we want to ever sit on a shelf. We want every member of the community working with us on grant programs and shaping how this project goes forward over the next decade.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you think?
That's wonderful. I also hope that, I guess in terms of local politics, these kind of suburban Chinatowns and redevelopment, urban renewal launch political careers for Asian Americans, for a lot of Asian Americans in terms of ethnic politics. Sure. And so I think that this is another opportunity for, at least from Asian American communities, immigrant communities, to kind of find a footing in local politics, to have a say in shaping the neighborhoods that they live in. And I think finally just a place that can demonstrate and illustrate Asian American history in Las Vegas, in Southern Nevada, right? That Asian Americans have this longer history. They have a connection to this place. They've not only contributed to this place, they've redefined Southern Nevada. And I think that's important for everyone to recognize as we move forward.
Thank you both so much for sharing your time and this wonderful conversation with us.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And that's all for today here in CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed this show, please share it with a friend. You can also rate our show and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter on our website. Don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care.